Well, we're here today with Harold Dunn. This August the 10th, 2013. And Mr. Dunn was in the infantry for a few years before Pearl Harbor. And then after hearing about Pearl Harbor, he was in the infantry for a while longer and then ended up in the U.S. Army Air Corps, where he was a B17 pilot and was shot down over Germany and actually interned at Stalag Luft 3, where he actually aided in the Great Escape in his own way, and was a POW throughout the end of the war. So I guess what we'll do just to get started is just kind of ask you, how did you get involved in the military?
Well, like I said, at that time we'd moved to a place where I couldn't get any work or anything. I'd been working at Kroger's off and on for quite a while as a kid. So I trapped the first winter, and we lived out halfway between Dexter and Essex, Missouri. So had a big drainage ditch, split the farm in half. I'd get up, run my traps early in the morning, and then catch the school bus. Took care of the stock. Ride the school bus to school, and that evening come in, I'd go back and set my traps out for the next night. And I made pretty fair money trapping. Then when Dad moved into town, and nothing to do. We built a house and a barn, and then after that I was footloose and no money. So I joined the National Guard that was at Dexter. I was 17, but that age, you can stretch your age a little bit sometimes. And they didn't find it till I was in the Air Force Cadets. Then they called me and said, "Hey," says, "you say you're so-and-so, and your record we got here says you're younger than that." I said, "Yeah, I lied to him." He says, "You can't say that." Says, "The recruiting officer misunderstood you." And that's where it went. I was already in training for the cadets at that time. Okay.
So as you got into the military, so what did you do? This was roughly 1937 that you got in.
Mm-hmm.
Were you in the National Guard at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I had, my first one was a Browning automatic rifle, and I did real good with that. And that's what got me started out. When they made a check on it, I ranked real high. And then they sent me down to division headquarters to give a demonstration with that Browning automatic rifle. And next week I was a corporal.
Okay.
And the next year I was a sergeant. I was a corporal over rifle squad for a year. Then I was sergeant then over the weapons platoon. At that time I had 2 machine guns and 4 mortars as a weapons platoon. And in 41 maneuvers in Louisiana, my platoon, I was attached to the general on the opposing side, the one that took Rangoon over there. And we moved through those swamps at night with no lights and did a good job. But in fact, he got his second star after that maneuver. Stillwell, I believe was his name.
So this was 1941
Mm-hmm.
that you were doing the maneuvers in Louisiana. Yeah. How did you hear about Pearl Harbor, and what were you doing around that time period that you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Well, that was later than that, I guess, for Pearl Harbor. I've been like anybody else in the Army on it. See, lots of odd things happened. Before I started grade school, we had a World War I biplane lit in the field behind the house, and they drug it up to the barn and left it there for 2 weeks. I hadn't started school, but a kid can crawl through an airplane. Well, for some crazy reason, I woke up one. I was a sergeant in infantry then at Little Rock, and I got up and I said, I want to go out to the airport. I went out there and there's an old biplane sitting out there that looked a whole lot like that old World War I one. I think it's a 26 model or 29, something like that. And I saw the pilot and he took me up for a ride. And while we were riding around, we come into land and people just running around like ants everywhere. And I crawled out. I was a sergeant then in uniform. I crawled out of the airplane. Taxi come raging up there. Said the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor.
So that's when you first heard about it.
Yeah. When I crawled out of the airplane, I heard about it. And so they hauled me out to camp and wouldn't take any charge for it. That's funny. The taxi did. Then we loaded up, and it took us a week to go from Little Rock to California. We pulled in Fort Ord. And I think we stayed there about 3 days and went up to San Francisco to the Cow Palace. And then I was platoon sergeant. They sent my platoon to Fresno. And I had 3 roadblocks in that Japanese farming community there at Fresno. And I won't tell another story there, but because something happened, I don't think it's ever been put out. Then I sent back to San Francisco, and I put it in a Presidio. And I had several piers down on the docks there. That was, we worked 8 hours on and 8 hours off. That was mean. The battleship, let's see, which one it was. One of the battleships, I think it was Pennsylvania, came in, and they had been bombed. They hit the turret, but I think killed the crew of the turret, but that wasn't. So I didn't have to have it. I relinquished that pier to them. Then they come through and says, "Anybody want to fly?" I said, "I do." So they sent me across the Golden Gate Bridge to a Navy base. I went in, took a physical and a written exam, and I passed it. Well, I was pulling guard duty on the aircraft plant in San Diego there, and our barracks was on the Marine base camp. Kind of funny getting in and out, but that's when my transfer came through to the Air Force while I was there. I went a month up above for interrogation or whatever, indoctrination, I guess. Then went to Santa Maria for primary. And then from primary, I went to Taft over in the valley, San Joaquin Valley, for basic. And then from there, I was sent to Arizona to Williams Field. And that's where I took my training and wound up flying, flying on under the hood with and just listening to the tower. And I was flying AT-6 and the instructor with me. And the tower told me what to do, and I couldn't see anything. I had the hood over me. And I just followed the tower's instructions. He yanked the hood out and said, "Land it." I was 50 feet off the runway.
Oh my gosh. So now they would actually put a hood over your head?
Oh yeah, I couldn't see nothing. And then the next day I was in twin engine. We started flying twin engine formations then. And then when I finished that, I sent to the city there in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
And training for whatever they do there wound up in B17s, but we had to go out there and do a lot of under the hood and that training. And then after it was in B17s, we went to another base there in Boise, Idaho. In Boise, Idaho, then went down, we put a few months in Casper, Wyoming, just logging time on the B17. Then went down to, sent us down to here in Kansas, on the Salina, Kansas, and we formed up a crew. We had one man missing, and so we formed up a crew, and I wound up as co-pilot. So we left Salina, Kansas, gassed up in Detroit, spent the night in let's see, that big base in Maine, Bangor,
Bangor?
Maine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bangor. Spent the night in Bangor, Maine. And then we went north into Goose Bay and stayed there 3 days. Then into Greenland, Iceland, on Greenland. Went to Greenland for a week. Got weathered in there. Then went to Iceland and stayed overnight there, and then flew down to Blackpool in Scotland, and they took our airplane. They were running short, and we had a good one.
So when do you think you landed in Scotland? Was this 1943 still?
Yeah, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we put it on a train, and we went to Thurley, England. I've got a picture of the squadron in yonder. And that's where we issued new different planes. They weren't as good as the one we had brought over, but that's what we got. They had been patched up a bit. So first time out, we did all right. And second time we went out, we had the number 2 engine conk just before we hit France. So we turned around and come back. And then the third time we went out, we went into, we bombed the sub pins there in Germany. And that was pretty rough. And they tried something that we got experimented on. They had some twin engine fighters up there with what we call stovepipes under the wing. And they fired their rockets. They'd pull out 800 yards from us out of 50 caliber range, and then fired rockets into the formation. It kind of messed things up a little bit, but we made it out. Second time was when the engine died when it hit France and went back. And the third time, I know exactly how the guy flew off to the right quite a bit, and then went way up ahead where we lost him. Then he come back and hit us head on. We had the low plane, and it's the one that's vulnerable for that type of fighting, where they could hit you head on without getting the rest of the group involved in it. So that's when we got shot down.
Were these Focke-Wulf 190s?
Yeah, that's the 190 shot us down. And then I was picked up fairly quick and put in overnight in camp.
Do you recall about where you bailed out and about where you were whenever you were shot down?
I was in the middle of Germany when I shot down. They shot 14 of us down that day. And we bombed the rubber plant. That's where I got shot down. And
Was that near Hulls, Germany? Is
Yeah.
that the name? Okay.
They had another, and they went back a month later to that machine plant. And they shot down 50 B-17s that day.
Wow.
Yeah. And after that, they cured that. They got the P-51 to go with them. And that was into that.
So whenever you were flying and you were shot down, you didn't have any fighter escorts.
Us.
It was just you guys.
Mm.
And they got 14 of you whenever you were shot down.
We got 14. And then the next big one, is where they bombed that ball bearing plant. They shot down 50 that day.
Mm-hmm.
But then, hey, they said something's got to happen, and the B-17, that P-51 could make it.
Mm-hmm.
They got company. And I don't know if any more of them have that trouble.
So do you feel like whenever the Germans were using the rockets as opposed to, when they were out of range, that was pretty much the turning point then, wasn't it?
Yeah, for that.
Did you feel like before they were using the rockets that you guys were holding your own?
Yeah, we were pretty well. The rockets, they'd bust up the formation.
Mm-hmm.
And, hey, when you're scattered out, they had easier pickings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was what that was about. And but the P-51 cured that. That twin engine didn't have any chance with it. So after that thing settled down a whole lot more.
So can you describe for me when your plane was hit, what actually happened? Can you?
Well, they hit the front of the airplane, shot the nose out of it, and hit the gas tank, number 3 engine gas tank. They had salvaged a B-17 and got it flyable and painted marks, took white paint and marked out where the gas tanks were and where the vulnerable parts on the airplane was, and had flown it around to all the fighter bases, that one. So he knew what to shoot at, all right. He hit our gas tank. And burned the bombardier bad, and the navigator got burned bad.
Mm-hmm.
And those two got burned bad. My flight suit coveralls got burned, but I wasn't hurt.
So I was reading your newspaper article, and it mentions that your oxygen bottles exploded.
Yeah, they hit them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they hit the oxygen bottles. Like I said, they had it marked out on their. Well, we didn't know that, but they did.
Mm-hmm. When was it clear you had to bail out?
Right off, because hey, you're in fire. You're in the flames.
Mm-hmm.
You can sit there. Yeah. The navigator and the bombardier in particular got burned, but real bad.
Did all of your flight crews survive getting shot down? Were they all taken prisoner?
As far as I know, yeah, all of them were.
Mm-hmm. They didn't all end up where you were, though,
no,
in Stalag 3.
we never saw the enlisted men again.
Okay.
Well, when I landed in a field, and I shot my chute and got it, tried to roll it up, and decided I couldn't stay there long, and I went across to some woods. Like I said, I've been an infantry in the timber, I knew where it's at there, and I got in a big brush pile and hid out. But here come a guard or a German with a rifle and a dog, and that dog tracked right up to me. And he says, "Haben Sie a pistol?" No, I didn't have any pistol. So he took me to a farmhouse. And there was a woman there and about 4 young girls. And somebody that's got to make a call. And about 20 minutes, a truckload of soldiers pulled up in the yard, and I got in the back of the truck with them. And they took me into the interrogation quarter. I was in 20 minutes of where I was interrogated, put me in there in a hole in the ground with a window about 12 feet up, small one. And
Now, were you injured when you bailed out?
a little bit, not much.
I read that you'd hurt your knee, but did you hit it or something, or whenever you bailed out?
This part of the outfit there on it, yeah.
Uh-huh.
No, and then the interrogation thing in there was funny. I was their top interrogation outfit, and I think we had 3 days of them. And then I got moved to the prison camp. But the man that did all of my interrogation after the war and everything, he was considered one of their best ones. He wound up in California. I found out years later. I got running down on it like this one here. So he is, and died in Florida.
All those guys came over here, didn't they?
Some of them. But the one top interrogator, I can understand his business. He was farming in the south tip of South Africa, had a farm down there, and doing good, and went home to visit his folks. You know, while he was there, the Germans just picked him up and stuck him in the army. But he'd married, his wife was English. Her father was one of the British generals. Of course, he got divorced. But hey, so you can sympathize with him slightly. And he was a good interrogator. But,
How long did your interrogation last?
oh, probably 2 or 3 hours or more.
Mm-hmm.
Then he put me in a truck and hauled me up to the other air base. Put me on a train and sent me to Saigon.
Can I ask you on the interrogation part? Were they mean to you at all? I mean, what was it like to be interrogated?
They just asked you a bunch of questions, and they weren't. They didn't bother me any other way. And the thing of going on the train, I put on the train, and the 2 guards there, they were dressed as civilians, and they were didn't say anything, but they watched pretty close. And I put in solitary confinement when I got to Saigon there, and they had a big board on the wall, a big wide board. I stretched out on that, and the guard looked in there and he hollered to the sergeant. He come up and screamed and hollered a little bit, and then he yanked that board off the wall and out the window with it, out the door with it. So there's this big bare room then. There's one window, I looked out the back window, and there's working some German POWs out there, clearing some timber. So I just went back and laid down, and they come back and took me into there and give me an interrogation then. But I went into the colonel, the Oberst, standing there, and there's one sergeant that had been screaming and hollering already, asked me some questions, and I wasn't giving him the answers he wanted. He got to screaming and hollering, going on again. And so they had another soldier, a POW, sitting there, and they walked him out the door, fired a shot. And they come back in, and he says, "You're next." I looked at him and said, "You didn't shoot that man." Oh, he went in the air screaming and hollering. And the German colonel standing back over, come out and made him shut up and sent him out. And he said, "What makes you think you didn't shoot that man?" I said, "It makes a different sound than that when you shoot someone, especially close." He never said another word. Yeah. So they put me in an outfit and took me out to the British compound. And so I was checked in there, and I was in the British compound for about 4 months, I guess.
So now you're at Stalag Lift 3 now.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the British compound. And that's where I got to carry dirt out of a tunnel. Hey, you sitting there, nothing to do, and they want you to do that. No problem. You had to take the sleeves, linings out of the sleeves on the coats, and take a small rope, tie the tops of them together, and then they fill them up like sausages, and tie the bottom. Then you just drop that around your neck, put your overcoat over it. Those were under your overcoat, and you walk out there where you wanted to drop it, and you untied the bottom of that, let those bags, and let them empty right there, and the other guys take care of the rest of it. They had one building there that the Germans kept one building for us. All the buildings were 2 feet off the ground, and they had their own building that nobody's in it all the time, just tools and stuff. It got ground level. There wasn't any space under that one.
And they never
They never noticed it too much. And they had somewhere else that I never did get to see where they were putting that dirt, but they had another place they were dumping like that. And but I never did make that run. But see, the Germans come in and went through everything there after that escape.
Well, let me ask you, when you were disposing of the dirt, you know, when you watch the movie The Great Escape, they have the guy walks out like you described with the bags of dirt They had him in his pants, so this fellow had it in his pants,
Well,
but,
if he had his coat on, it's under his coat.
okay.
But you had the guy on each side was the ones to hide it. They had to cover that dirt up.
So were they doing gardening? Like in the movie, they were doing gardening.
Well, it could have been there, but where I was, I didn't do that. But they'd stomp it in. Did you notice them standing there stomping?
Yeah.
Well, the ones that were stomping was buried in that dirt. That's what that was. I knew what was going on.
It's pretty ingenious.
Yeah.
So you worked disposing of dirt for a little while, and then they moved you back to the American compound. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that was before the escape took place.
Oh yeah, that was. I guess in the fall, it was probably 2 or 3 months before the escape.
So what was it like when? I mean, you probably had no clue exactly when it was going to happen.
No.
But what was it like when you guys found out that it
Well,
happened
you
that
found
night?
out very early. All the lights came on and sirens were blasting, and they woke you up in a hurry.
Mhm.
Yeah, when they found it out. And I guess they killed every one of them that got out, as far as I know. I've got a report somewhere in there on it.
Were there any reprisals from the guards or from the commandant of the camp on the rest of the prisoners in the camp?
Not on our side, no.
Mm-hmm.
And the British handled them pretty. The British were, they were used to dealing with them a lot more than we did. And they'd do things. The British would do things that we couldn't even get halfway away with.
Was it true that the British side were made up more of the problem prisoners, the repeat escape offenders from other camps? Was that true? Were they all brought to Stalag Luft 3 because they thought it was escape proof?
I don't know about that. They actually, on the British side, they seemed to have it pretty good. I couldn't complain being POW there. Of course, the British were, they have a different outlook on things completely from what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept them aggravated as much as they could. It was nothing new. It was a part of their outfit to aggravate them.
How was life in Stalag Luft 3? Because you ended up at another camp, correct?
Luft 3, we started out, I guess, with about 8 men in the camp in a room, and wound up about 12. And we did our own cooking and everything like that.
So you had quarters in the barracks.
Yeah, we'd have a room, one room, and then double deck, and then finally got to after the Romanian and brought them in from Romania. We went into 3 tiers in the bunks, and that really crowded things pretty good. But after the Romanian deal, but it didn't last too long until we had to move.
How was the food and everything? Did they keep you well fed, or how were the conditions with regard to survival?
Well, you did get fat, but we did our own cooking, and they furnished our canned goods, and the Red Cross packages. We got them. As long as we got one package a week to a man, well, I've got somewhere what those were. And those packages, you could survive on them pretty good. Then we got down to half a package per man for a while, but I know he's going to want that. I had those papers out.
So, so they let you keep your Red Cross packages and the food that came in it and everything. I imagine at that point in the war, the Germans were still doing okay for their own food, because I've heard from other POWs that, especially after the Battle of the Bulge, for instance, food became very scarce in some of the POW camps.
We were moving around. They was moving us then after the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay.
We had a radio operator, radio there for us to listen to it all the time when they got that. And we had a Navy pilot. His last name was Dunn, like mine. And he run out of gas right off of Norway and had to ditch his plane. And he got out and got in his dinghy and paddled ashore. And the German guards picked him up when he landed. They took him in. If I'm not mistaken, he was one of the Navy officers out from Boston. And that
Was there ever any, as far as the Great Escape, was there ever any hope that you might get to go, participate, and actually get out?
No, we never had anyone that could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Moving there, if you could, a guy could talk German, he might have been able to, but the civilians were all in on it too. They were as much as anything.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them be worse than the soldiers, I guess.
On the American side of the compound, was there any concerted effort to do your own tunneling?
Yeah, we had some that did that, but they never did make it anywhere.
Mm-hmm. I've been reading that, there was the 3 tunnels, Tom, Dick, and Harry,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's also the tunnel George. There's a 4th tunnel that they found that was actually dug towards the end of the war because there was a fear that the Germans might try to massacre all the POWs as the Russians approached, and there's a tunnel dug from one of the barracks to the guard supply hut that had ammunition and guns and that sort of thing. And the thought was, as I understood it, that if there was a concern that there might be a massacre getting ready to take place, that they would go through the tunnels, raid the supply hut, and get their own guns and try to fight it out.
No, I don't know anything about that one.
Okay. So when did they first move you guys? Whenever you were, did they move you from Stalag Luft 3 to Stalag 7A? Is that when they did that? And was that after the Battle of the Bulge? Was it early 45 when they did that?
It was after the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned this Navy pilot, he was pretty sharp. His name was Dunn, but I got it in here on that book there somewhere. But they found a radio in his bed.
Really?
He built his own. So he got 21 days on bread and water.
Oh boy.
But they saved the food, so when he got out, he could have a bash. He was one of the Navy pilots.
So how did he build his own radio? I mean, how did you get parts and things like that?
You scrounge around and find this and that and the other, and he knew what he was doing, so he built one. And the Germans found it. We had another, and they never did find.
It was a radio to receive, not transmit,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
So he was just listening to whatever music was.
Yeah. Well, hey, you could get the Army reports.
Oh,
So we know what was going on.
I see.
And,
And after D-Day, that's a big deal to kind of hear the progress of what's
yeah.
going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did a good job. And we had another one. See, the Germans had one up that you could listen to on their radio. But we had another or two that connected with the other way, where they didn't even have the German stuff on it. And that one was that way, so they put him gave him 21 days on bread and water. And we saved his food so when he come out, he could kind of gain some of it back.
If I could go back to the Great Escape part of things again, I know that the Gestapo executed 50 of the 76 prisoners, and the POWs were allowed to make a memorial there at the camp in honor of those. Did you ever see that or have a chance to participate in building it or anything?
No. And I don't know how many was all totally involved in it, but the Germans really were upset about that, and as far as I know, they killed everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I know that made that escape.
Mm-hmm. I know that I read that only three made it to freedom out of the whole group.
Yeah.
And they were all like Norwegians, I think. But, well, when they relieved the current commandant, you guys got a new commandant.
Yeah. He was a colonel, and he couldn't speak English at all. In 3 weeks, he was speaking English.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. Wow, he was a pretty smart boy.
Did he seem to treat the prisoners okay?
Yeah, not much changed I can see. And like I said, now after the war, I don't know where this one. I knew where he wound up after the war, and the other one of the men did all the interrogation wound up in Los Angeles or in California, and this one wound up in Florida.
Well, what was it like moving from Stalag 3 to Stalag 7A? How far did you have to march? Do you know? What were the conditions like for that?
It was pretty miserable. It was really cold, and we marched. And another thing, the first night I went in a barn. We had different buildings that got, and I was in the same barn with this man. The right here. We're in. Some guy stepped on somebody in the middle of the night, and you called the big group barb. And I think Wright was the one that got stepped on. And he tells about the German, population moving there. And there's one wagon come by, the woman driving the cart or whatever it was, and baby crying. It didn't sound too good. It's pretty mean. It's about 0 weather. All that, so the German population was having troubles too.
So when you ended up at Stalag 7A at Mooseburg, what was that like? How did that camp compare to where you just come from?
7A was, and they were about out of everything, and we didn't have much food of any. Food was really scarce. And you just get a straw tick and lay on the floor. It was overcrowded, and then and food was really, really bad. And the last day there, when they got liberated, so I get these all. There was four men in a steeple when the battle started, and they had a machine gun up there, and I don't know whether they ever opened up on it or not, but one of the tanks swung his gun around and that blew that whole steeple off the building, just totally eliminated it. Well, I was walking close to the fence, and the sniper in the tree shot the building by me. The bullet went through both sides of the building and hit a man in the leg on the far side. And maybe 2 or 3 minutes later, a P-51 went right over that woods. And it cleared him maybe 50 feet. And he fell out of the tree. I don't know whether, I didn't hear the machine gun, didn't hear the plane fire, but he fell out of the tree. And then another, on my right down there was banisters of a bridge up above the treetops. A tank had went up on the bridge and they blowed it, banisters anyway, and he just backed off, didn't hurt him, and then he made it. Then the tank come up to the front gate, and then that thing settled down then.
So that was the battle that happened right before you guys were liberated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When the tank come up to the front gate, and that was General Patton, and I met him in the Louisiana maneuvers. On that, I was standing by the bridge. I've got pictures of it somewhere. All my guns were displaced, and I was by myself. And the one guy there had a 50 caliber machine gun for anti-aircraft fire on water cooled on a tripod. And they bombed it with 5-pound bags of flour, and declared the bridge blowed out. A little while, here come a tank roaring up there, but he couldn't cross the bridge. He went down below and he got stuck. They got him out pretty fast. It was Major Patton.
Really?
Well, still got his second star over those maneuvers, so he did all right. And I got to hear Patton raise a ruckus. And he's the one that comes through the gate. His tank's the one that comes through the gate on that 7A POW.
Did once they came through the gate, did all the German guards just scatter?
They were gone. They were gone before he got there.
Did you guys mob the tanks?
No.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, they didn't mob them. We went up there. Really were glad to see them, sure. Yeah.
Did General Patton say any words to you guys? Did he have any little prepared words? Or?
No, he just got out and looked around a minute and left, as far as I can tell. I don't know whether he said anything. I wasn't that close.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew what he was doing.
So once he left, were you guys just free to go on your own at that point, or did they bring?
The guards were all gone when he left. There wasn't any guards.
So what did you do at that point? Did you guys all get in groups and?
We had our own group. We took care of ourselves in those camps. And we had our own formation, and we stayed there then until they took us out. But that camp, the food was really scarce in that camp.
So after Patton left, obviously the rest of the U.S. Army was coming through at that point too. So you guys just had to wait until supplies came and medical supplies and personnel.
I went out with some Russians. See, they had a whole lot of Russians there, and they did all kinds of stuff. And I went out scrounging with one group of Russians, and they got a big old sow, beat her down and rolled it, drug her through a fire and started eating. I couldn't eat it that way, but so I left them. One of them said, excuse me if it had too good to eat with them, but I couldn't eat raw pork myself. But hey, they had it rough. They were pretty decent, a bunch of people, really.
I'd heard that when there were Russian prisoners in the camps, the Germans kind of treated them more harshly. Did you see that?
Yeah, they did. But then the Russians got even with them.
Yeah.
It worked both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, they tried to be real mean to the Russians, but after a while you might turn your head the wrong way sometime. And they didn't have nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. There's no soft feelings there at all.
what feelings went through you whenever you were liberated, whenever Patton came? I mean, did you guys know something was coming? You knew your liberation was coming?
Yeah, we got a pretty good grapevine on what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
See, they had sent men down to meet them before they ever got there. And they did. They sent some men to meet the oncoming army.
Mm-hmm.
That what they could do about the camp. And so we knew they were coming, but we didn't know just exactly when. Until you hear the gunfire,
Mm-hmm.
and a pretty short fight there at the camp.
Did you ever feel in danger during that part?
Oh, no more than any other time.
How much weight do you think you lost?
I don't know. I'd hate to record the weight. Lost quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were pretty hard up for food there that last one.
So after you were liberated and you made it, we were back in Allied hands. I read that you ended up at Camp Lucky Strike for a while to kind of rehabilitate, right?
Well, we had an air base, German air base, a few miles over, and they'd fly the planes in and fly us out. But we had to lay over a few days before that. And then I think we had to lay over 8 days, I believe, before they could fly us out. Then they flew us down to Lucky Strike.
So you were healthy enough to travel back to the U.S. at that point and everything?
Yeah, well, at Lucky Strike, when I got down there, I stayed there. They couldn't feed everything you had, really. They were hard up for feeding the group. And so I think I laid over about 3 or 4 days there at Lucky Strike. And then I went down and went into France. They give us a little money, and we went into Belgium before I went to Lucky Strike. And I went out and bought me a pint of ice cream and ate the whole thing.
So that was your first
Yeah.
taste of luxurious food since you were shot down?
Yeah,
Huh?
Belgium. And Belgium wasn't as hard up as the rest of them. So they treated us good, the Belgians did, and like I said, I bought a pint of ice cream, and boy, that was wonderful. And then I went from there down to Lucky Strike. Lucky Strike couldn't hardly handle us, they had so many. And I went into France one go round and wasn't impressed. But they had having hard times too, I guess.
Mm. So do you recall when you came back to the U.S.?
Well, I went on, they put it on a ship. And I went up, walked down through the aisles there, and room number 13 was empty. And there's 3 of us, others over there come by, and for some reason they didn't want on room 13, so we had 4 of us in that room 13. And went into Boston.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like when you arrived back in the U.S.? Were you pretty happy to be back?
Oh yeah, naturally. Wound up, one of my brother-in-laws was from Boston, a little later on. And I had 2 brother-in-laws, one of them was in the paratroopers, and he's in the bunch that jumped and liberated there in France on the D-Day. He's a pretty good-sized boy. He was center for Kentucky basketball team. And they have his picture in their city museum or whatever they have. They got his picture in there. They bailed out and run the Germans out of the town. The Germans regrouped and come back and run them out. And they regrouped and run the Germans out the next time again. And of course, at the end of that, he's in a paratrooper bunch that landed there. And they have his picture in that. I guess he's pretty impressive paratrooper.
Do you recall, was he defending a bridge whenever they did that?
No, this is a town.
It was a town.
Yeah, this was going into the town.
Okay.
And then they wound up pretty close to where they bombed those dams.
Mm-hmm.
He was in the woods there. They were fighting an SS unit in those woods when they bombed those dams there and flooded everything. He said they always kept us tied up with them. Said we was always fighting that bunch. So one of the SS units. And one my brother-in-law that lived in Boston, pretty well up there, I guess. I think his sons were head of the police department there. And he wound up in Arizona and married my wife's sister. And real nice. We run around a bit. And let's see, he was on the battleship Missouri when
They surrendered?
surrender sign.
Mm-hmm.
And he wouldn't tell me a thing about it. I mean, he's close-mouthed on that.
Mm-hmm.
He worked the newspaper stuff quite a bit, and I don't know what his job or what he worked with it, but he worked on it some, and that's it. No, not one word. So I got that book in there, and it shows pictures on the ones that watching them signing that outfit. So it's quite a crowd, and he was there. But he was not one word about what went on with it.
Well, so what'd you do after the war?
I went to college. Hey, I only had 11th grade education, but if I'd had more, I'd been hired. Now, you know, see, even in, let's see, even this book here, see, this is where you go through, see, here's the cadets and the whatnot, the schooling there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm classified as an aviation student. Yeah, that would be here I am as a student.
Yeah, I can see that.
See, that's the ones that the students wound up warrant officers.
Right there.
Mm.
Let's get this on camera here. So you can see my thumb. There's Mr. Dunn right there. Good looking young guy.
Well, I guess I was 20 then.
So you went to college afterwards, and what did you do for a career?
I was a soil conservation service. District conservation is soil conservation service.
Mm-hmm. When you look back on your time in World War II, is there anything that anything that sticks out in your mind after all this time, or did it change you at all?
I don't think it did, because quick as I got out, I went to college and finished up my schooling. I took agriculture. That's why I wound up in the soil conservation service.
Mm-hmm.
A degree in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what I do.
Eric, you got any questions?
Yeah, I'll give it a few questions. You had wanted to fly. You're really excited about flying. You went from the infantry to the Air Corps.
Well, my brother-in-law that they got his picture hanging in there in France, he and I was building an airplane in the hay barn. And I guess his dad didn't like it. He come in one day and says, "You boys have something in that shed?" He run a tractor over it.
Oh no.
Yeah, I guess we fool around that way.
Could you tell us a little bit about your very first flying mission you went on? Were you excited? Were you scared?
No, hey, you kind of wound up, your eyes were watching anything coming. No, it wasn't. The first one was going into France there. Why, you usually got mid at the outfit and at the border. And so it's just part of, that's part of everyday life. You expected things to start flying around.
And maybe he asked this, maybe I missed it, but how did you first find out about the British planning this escape? Did they?
They asked me if I carried dirt. I didn't see anything. It's kind of dull in there. I carried dirt.
So they obviously trusted you because, you know, you were mistakenly an American in the British compound.
Well,
How did that happen? How did you end up in the British compound briefly?
my hometown was Essex, Missouri, and it's bombing strafe in Essex, England.
Ah, okay.
Big 400 population town named Essex.
No kidding.
They wanted my home address, so the British camp. They were bombing Essex, England.
When you went over to the American part of the camp, did you keep it to yourself? Did you let any of your American GIs go, hey, the British are planning this escape?
You don't talk about things like that.
Yeah.
That's their business.
Yeah.
Where did you get the dirt? Like, I mean, I know when you went back to get more dirt, for instance,
They bring it.
they just bring it to you.
Yeah, I'd meet them in place and they'd take the dirt and I'd go.
So you never saw the tunnels.
I never went in the tunnel. I know how they were. That one tunnel had a railroad track laid in it. And
Was the movie pretty accurate?
I don't remember the parts of the movie, but it had a railroad, had a track laid in it that was, carts would run this track, just like a railroad track, from way back down to there.
Mm-hmm.
And they could move dirt pretty good.
Wow.
It was, and had bellows for air, furnished air into the tunnel. It was quite a tunnel, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what shook the Germans up.
I was going through one of these books and they're showing pictures of like them the POWs playing sports, you know, participating in choir and theater. Did you participate in anything like that?
No, we had a outfit that they put on shows and everything. There in the South Compound, we had a band and did shows and all that kind of stuff. They did. I wasn't in on any of that, but the ones that wanted it could do it fairly well.
Might take a look at this.
What do you think the worst thing you saw was during the war?
I don't know. It's when it's on the trains, I guess is the crowded is as full as they can be crowded, and no water and no food, no water or anything like that. And it's down around 0 weather. So.
Were you concerned about being strafed when you're in those trains?
Yeah. Maybe they got the word out. You know, the underground worked pretty good. We weren't ever strafed.
Guess it would have been hot as can be when you're packed in the train.
And 0 weather.
0. Yeah, I didn't hear the 0 part. My bad. I'm sorry.
We didn't worry about heat.
Sorry.
How about the disease or anything? Did any of you guys have dysentery or any sort of?
We made it pretty well all the way through that way. We didn't have too much of that problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess soldiers are supposed to be rough, huh?
Yeah.
You mentioned on the train. Did they stop at all?
Yeah.
Or did they just go straight?
Yeah, they stopped it. You maybe parked for a day. You know, it maybe take 3 days or so in the train.
Mm-hmm. I just have one last question, I believe. Actually, I probably two. One, how did you find out the war was over?
Hey, Patton come in the front gate. When he come in the gate, the war was over.
And and the second is World War II veterans. They're understandably, and I agree, they're known as heroes, and also you're part of what is called the greatest generation. What do you have to say about being called those two things? Because
We just did our job, that's all I can say. We had that job to do and we worked at it.
I think it's safe to say that those 3 years and 8 months, this nation rallied and came together like no other time, and I think in our history, and defeated two very large forces in the world at the same time. And when I talk to guys from World War II, what I'm struck with is the resilience that you guys had, because you'd all come through the Depression. You knew what it was like to be hungry. You knew what it was like to want for clothes and things like that. And so when you were forged a little bit and ready for, I think, for that conflict.
Well, the conflict, see, like I said, I was under the one that took Rangoon in Louisiana from. I was working under him when he got his second star. And I knew how he worked. And I knew how they moved through those swamps.
Well, what made you want to get out of the Army and into the Air Force? Were you
always wanted to fly.
So you just wanted to fly?
Yeah. And they said, anyone want to fly? And I said, I do. So I got transferred to the Air Force. Yeah, they were hunting pilots.
Well, any more questions?
you covered most of it, so
Okay.
I don't have any more.
Well, I want to thank you for allowing us in your home and letting us sit down with you for an hour or two here and talk to you about your experiences. And I just want to thank you for your service and everything that you did for us. So I have no further questions.
Okay. Well, thank you. I didn't know it was important, but